Alien and Aliens are two of the best films ever made, and if you don't agree, then you! Here's what your lack of priorities caused you to miss for the last 4 decades. One of the joys of rewatching Alien is getting to appreciate all the different techniques the filmmakers used to psych you out the first time around. We can make an hour-long video about how Alien ratchets up the tension and puts viewers into the minds of the various Nostromo crew members. Instead, we'll focus on just one small detail that most viewers will miss the first time they see Alien. That is, all the times they actually see the alien. In a couple of key scenes, a xenomorph can be seen lurking in the shadows behind our beloved characters. When Brett goes looking for Jonesy the cat, the scene stretches on as Brett aimlessly wanders the halls. Careful viewers can occasionally spot the xenomorph hidden among the machinery and ductwork of the set. The director's cut also includes a shot of the xenomorph hidden in plain sight leading up to Brett's death, which worked because at that point in the movie, the alien had yet to fully reveal itself. Later, when Ripley is getting ready to go into cryosleep, she discovers the alien curled up on the escape ship. It's a shock to viewers, but it's been there from the very beginning of the scene. The creature is hard to spot in the darkened shuttle, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's entirely possible that Alien would never have been as enduring as it is if it had been made today. The thing was made for $11 million after all. With a limited budget, the crew had to squeeze every ounce of juice out of the sets they built, and the end result of that is that everything feels viscerally real. Take the relatively simple opening shots as an unlikely example. Just by having the camera pan through the halls and rooms of the ship, the atmosphere and texture of everything immediately sets the mood. It's impossible not to be engrossed in the world of Alien from the get-go, and you barely realize that 5 minutes go by before you see a single person. It also speaks to resourcefulness when you don't have a lot of CGI to fall back on. Ridley Scott and the film crew had been trying to come up with some sort of reactive membrane to cover the eggs in the hold of the space jockey's ship. As it happens, the rock band The Who was rehearsing on a soundstage next to the production and were testing out new scanning lasers to use for their live shows. Scott took one look at the lasers and knew they had the solution.
There's a layer of mist just covering the eggs that reacts when broken.
And when it came to the actual space jockey set, they just didn't have the budget to build it as large as they wanted to. Rather than settle for a smaller, less impressive alien, they simply pivoted to a low-tech approach. For the wide shots, Scott's kid stood in for the actors to give the set the proper sense of scale. No one is going to say that CGI can't look incredible, but it's all too easy for a filmmaker to wave their hand and say they'll fix a problem in post-production. When you rewatch Alien today, you immediately notice how much the practical sets and props elevate the movie. Working in a real space and being forced to deal with problems on the fly inadvertently created some of the most iconic shots of the film. The otherworldly props and sets of Alien wouldn't stand out nearly as much as they do if it wasn't for the designer behind them, a little-known Swiss artist named H.R. Giger.
Ridley wants that I do the 3 monsters. That was the face hugger, the chest burster, and the big alien.
In addition to designing the aliens, he was also hands-on in the set design, even airbrushing the entire space jockey set by hand. Scott basically split the film's design between 2 brains, as he put it. Giger handled everything alien, while everything with a human origin was designed by Michael Seymour. Ironically, rewatching Alien now, some of the designs feel, well, overused, but only because they've now had nearly 50 years to influence cinema. Stranger Things, The Expanse, The Descent, Event Horizon, The Tomorrow War, Life, Alien has been openly cited as a direct influence on all of them, and that's just scratching the surface. There's even alien DNA in places you wouldn't expect. For example, Laura Dern says her character in Jurassic Park, Dr. Ellie Sattler, was a conscious riff on Ripley. In video games, you see it in everything from Contra and Metroid to Halo and 2022's Scorn, to name a few.
A desolate hellscape, filled with biomechanical contraptions.
It's obviously a stretch to say that every biomechanical design element in sci-fi since has drawn from Giger and Alien, but the rippling influence is undeniable. There's simply no way to overstate how the design and aesthetic of Alien has permeated sci-fi and horror culture to this day. And rewatching Alien is an awesome reminder of how much impact it had, and continues to have. Decades after the release of Alien, there are 2 characters in the entire movie that most people can tell you about, a xenomorph and Ripley. In the years since that movie made its debut, multiple sequels have cemented Ripley's place as one of the best sci-fi heroines of all time. The franchise has proven that it can continue without her, but Ripley will always be a key part of the alien mythology. Ripley's towering stature in the sci-fi genre makes her introduction in Alien even more fun to watch now. Back in 1979, most of the movie's cast members weren't well-known stars, and Ridley Scott Scott used that fact to obscure the movie's real protagonist. When the crew first wakes up, the camera follows John Hurt's Kane, and in the scenes that follow, Ripley is just a background player. She hardly has any speaking lines until the search party returns from the crashed ship on LV-426. Alien initially pushes Ripley to the background because she's not really the hero of the movie. She's just the only crew member who survives. The sequels turned Ripley into more of an action hero capable of slaughtering dozens of xenomorphs, so it's easy to forget that when the story began, she was just as scared as any other human encountering a monstrous, unstoppable alien for the first time. When audiences first settled into theaters in May 1979 to watch Alien, everything in the movie was brand new and, dare we say it, alien. And some parts intentionally left filmgoers with more questions than answers. Like, where did all the eggs come from? Well, Aliens came along to answer that when it introduced the xenomorph Queen, a veritable assembly line for eggs eager to introduce a face to a hug. But then, years later, Alien fans got to see a deleted scene that was added to the director's cut, where it's revealed that the xenomorph isn't killing the Nostromo crew members, it's actually kidnapping them and slowly and excruciatingly turning them into more eggs. That deleted scene seemingly cleared up a small plot hole in the original film, but since we already know there are queens to lay eggs, it introduced an even bigger problem for the franchise as a whole. So, which explanation is legit? Well, after years of novelizations and semi-canonical mentions, and even more deleted scenes, it's likely that both methods of reproduction are possible. Egg morphing, or what the xenomorph was doing to Dallas and Brett in Alien, is generally considered a way for a single drone to repopulate in the absence of a queen. The idea is that some of those gestating eggs can produce a new queen to speed things up.
Busy little creatures, huh?
In Alien 3, a scene that was deleted from the theatrical release but included in the quadrilogy box set showed a variation called a royal facehugger that could presumably impregnate hosts with queen chestbursters, and that was presumably the thing that impregnated Ripley with a queen. But with so many different versions of the film that change details and pivotal scenes, the specific lore gets royally convoluted.
It's amazing to me that Fox is the #1 studio in the country because they're all such a bunch of morons.
Does knowing all this change the way you view Alien on a rewatch? Well, yeah, and not necessarily in a good way. The sheer mystery of what that ruthless killing machine wanted was a huge part of the horror of the movie, and giving its behavior an explanation kind of lessens the impact of that. Aliens doubled down on everything Alien introduced. Like the first film, its practical sets and effects built an immersive alien world that still sucks you in to this day. And while Alien influenced untold sci-fi horror projects, Aliens pretty much became the archetype for space marines that would be emulated for decades afterwards.
All right, sweethearts, what are you waiting for? Breakfast in bed? Another glorious day in the Corps.
But if you strip away the surface layers, Aliens has entirely different themes driving the plot. One of those is the idea of motherhood. It's an important subtext that the movie doesn't start developing until about halfway through. And there's one scene in Aliens that's so crucial to that core theme, we still can't believe it ended up getting cut from the initial theatrical release, though it was restored for the extended edition released on home video. It comes early in the movie, right before Ripley has a meeting with Weyland-Yutani executives. Ripley asks Burke if he's found any information about her daughter. He reveals that in the 60 years since Ripley went into the shuttle's cryopod at the end of Alien, her daughter has lived out a full life and died.
I promised her that I would be home for her birthday.
Ripley's devastation in that scene is deeply moving, and it lays important groundwork for her emotional state throughout the rest of the movie, particularly her need to protect Newt at all costs. Newt's inclusion in the film in general ratchets up the tension and humanizes Ripley, but the added context in that deleted scene gives her character so many more layers. Ripley mentions her daughter elsewhere in the movie, but that deleted scene really hammers home the fact that she isn't just a cliche good person doing the right thing. She's nurturing a young girl to make up for the absence of her own daughter.
I'm not gonna leave you, Newt. I mean that. That's a promise.
There's one detail in Aliens that was impossible to spot when the movie first debuted, because it didn't exist yet. Much of the movie takes place inside the industrial buildings of the LV-426 colony, with the characters fighting off xenomorphs while running through narrow hallways and ducking under steaming metal pipes. The set later went on to play a big role in another film that's become a pop culture icon, Batman. One of the most pivotal scenes in Tim Burton's 1989 superhero flick takes place in the Axis chemical plant, where Jack Napier falls into a vat of toxic sludge and becomes becomes the Joker. Burton started shooting Batman not long after Aliens debuted in 1986, and their studio had access to the set that was used for some of the interior shots of the colony in the latter movie. So, Burton borrowed the set, and LV-426 became Axis Chemicals. The place looks a little different with Batman running through it instead of the xenomorphs, but if you're watching carefully, you can see that both movies were filmed in the same place. You can also spot a few other borrowed set elements, like Batman's chair in the Batcave, which was originally used in the Marines' personnel carrier. Believing that the xenomorphs are the villains of the Alien franchise is an easy enough mistake to make, but on a revisit, it's easy to see that they're really just animals carrying out their basic instincts, no different than anyone you'd meet during the lunch rush at Quiznos. The xenomorphs absolutely present real threats, but at least in the world established by the first two movies, they're never ultimately responsible for all the slaughter they commit. One of the most crushing moments in Alien is when Ripley interfaces with Mother and learns that the Nostromo has had a secret mission all along to retrieve samples of alien life from LV-426. Even though she's technically in command of the ship, the company has ordered Ash to prioritize bringing the aliens to Earth above all else. In Aliens, the idea that a profit motive is the real evil becomes even more explicit. The alien attack on the LV-426 colony all starts because Burke wants to retrieve samples that he can sell back to the company for a profit.
You know, Burke, I don't know which species is worse. You don't see them f***ing each other over for a goddamn percentage.
The Weyland-Yutani Corporation is clearly modeled after the worst global conglomerates in our own world, and characters like Burke are meant to represent greedy, ladder-climbing corporatists. The company and its employees are willing to risk anything to make more money, and because of their greed, the xenomorphs are unleashed on helpless humans and have been preying on us at the movies ever since.